All right, well, as our panel makes the way to the stage, I'd like to thanks for sticking around and coming back with us after lunch. My name is Marty Schneider. I'm president of Longenecker and Associates. I expect a vigorous discussion today. We've had this group next door chugging espresso for about the last 45 minutes. So really expect a lot of energy, maybe some bad decisions. I don't know, we'll see. But I will dispense with the resume reading. It's a very distinguished panel. I'm really proud to be up here with all of them, but I'll introduce them name and company. So starting at the end, we have Bob Smith from Fluor, Jim Blankenhorn from Amentum, Michael Lempke from HII, Dena Volovar from Bechtel, Heatherly Dukes from BWXT, and Joe McBrearty from AtkinsRéalis. So no death by PowerPoint today, no back-to-back-to-back presentations, but hopefully some meaningful discussion about the key issues that I think folks at this level, the executives who are leading our industry, are tackling on a day-to-day basis. And so I'll be guiding them through some discussion as well, but also want you to be thinking about your questions for this group. We'll have some time for questions from the audience as we approach the end of our time together. So I invite you to kind of join in on the discussion as well. So just to kick us off, instead of asking you to each do some introductory comments, to kick us off, I'll start down at the end with Joe and just kind of work our way down the line. But we've heard a lot about 35 years into EM. We've heard a lot from Candace Robertson and the secretary and a lot of our field office managers about the challenges EM is facing now and in the decades ahead. So just give us a few thoughts as, at this point in EM's evolution, what's the number one issue in your mind that should be focused on to make sure we continue the success trajectory?
So Marty, thanks very much for the opportunity to kick us off here.
Man, you're the new guy here, right? You got to go through some hazing.
With a rather loaded question. So first off, I think we have to reflect on all the success that EM has had over the last really 35, 40 years. When you look at where the program was back in the 1980s and the 90s and what we have done today to affect cleanup across the U.S. is frankly amazing. And it was interesting, the previous speaker was talking about the high-level waste and the challenge with that. But when we look at what the department has been able to accomplish over the last several decades in cleaning up cities, cleaning up towns and sites, it is really remarkable. And that is a challenge. I think if you ask people back in the 1980s, were we going to be able to do that? I think there were a lot of folks that probably frowned and did not think that we could do it. But we have been able to do that. And going into the next several decades, I think the key thing for me is we have to have the right people doing it. We have gotten to the point where a lot of the folks in the room, and it's actually good to see faces out there that are under 55, maybe under 40, maybe under 30, because this is the new generation of folks who are actually going to take this torch that the previous generation has carried for so many years and bring it forward. So for me, it's making sure that we have the right level of resourcing, and that's really human talent. We'll get money. I mean, money will come from the federal government, but we have to have the right enthusiastic, charged up people across the entire spectrum who understand the need for the environmental management program, the need to clean up the legacy contamination across not only the United States, but the world. I just came from Canada, and Canada has a similar issue, not quite as, the scale is not the same, but the issues are the same. And people are very concerned about making sure we can do this right. But we have to start today, and we are doing it, with getting the right level of education and the right, I would say, mindset for people that this is a critical mission for people to do. So that's where I would start.
Heatherly?
So I look across the complex right now, and I got to tell you, it's a good time to be an EM. When I look at some of the projects and where they're at, it's kind of amazing. I look at West Valley, it's just about ready to bring down the reprocessing plant. When you really look at their budget, I mean, it's kind of amazing how well they have done that project. And then you look at a Portsmouth, where you've got on-site waste disposal cell, and 326 came down, which used to be a highly enriched facility, and you look at all the excavation of the plumes that they're doing. You look at a Savannah Riverside liquid waste, where they have taken the salt processing and emptying the tanks to a whole new level. Still more to go, but it's leaps and bounds above where it was before. You just look at these projects and others, there's a tremendous amount of work being done. But when I look back, and I hate to tell you, I've been with EM in the industry for 35 years or more. I kind of look back at the old days where it seemed like it was a little easier to get to that type of momentum within a contract. And I know we talk about tailoring and things of that nature for the requirements, but that really needs to be an emphasis, because there is such a big challenge ahead of us on cleanup initiatives, where we really need to get serious about trying to tailor, and if we are successful at one site with that tailoring, really trying to propagate it across the complex. But I don't want to take anything away from what we're doing, because it's amazing, but that would be an area of emphasis, I think, that we may have learned in the last 35 years.
Dena?
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Joe had the fortune of going first, but when I think about, as Heather Lee was mentioning, the momentum that the industry is seeing at this point in time, the great things that are being done, and the fact that in some sites we're working ourselves out of work, which is the point, and others we're creating we're at the front end of what will be somewhat more of an enduring mission. When you talk about the waste treatment plant, WIP will go on for another 30 years. And so what it comes down to me is people, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're not really generating anything. We don't create things. We use people and the expertise and their judgment to push the mission forward. And so I think what's really critical is, one, not just having qualified resources, but how are we transferring, all the momentum that got us to this point came in the sweat of brows of folks that aren't going to be around meaning they will retire, won't be around for very much longer. And so how do we very, I think, meticulously and purposefully transfer those lessons so we don't learn them yet again, and we can continue to take things forward? How do we enhance our training and bring people up the curve faster, because we want to bring in those folks, but also get them performing at a faster rate. And then, in addition, do that while we maintain the experienced personnel and make use of those. So I think a really, really structured, really deliberate approach to workforce management, but really talent development, lessons learned, capturing, and keeping that momentum flowing forward through our resources, I think is pretty cool.
Michael?
I would agree, and I think one of the themes you think about, Joe and Dena, you're talking about workforce and people. Any successful program is rooted in the people, executed in a system, and operates within a culture that surrounds those. So when you think about a successful program, you want to build a set of systems that drives alignment on values and vision, so that we all know exactly where we're going. We have agreement on that. Alignment on the business objectives, so we know what we're going to do to get there and how we're going to judge success. And then I think another important aspect is alignment, if you will, or effective governance and metrics. So governance at the end of the day lives at that balance point between trust and control, right, where you're never fully comfortable, but you're working together as a team. And then the metrics measure those things that are aligned with the vision and values and drive towards successful execution and knowing that you actually hit your business objectives. So one of the challenges I think we have, notwithstanding the amazing success of the program, is that when there is this much work going on, you can drift away from being aligned in your vision, your values, and your objective measures of success. So I do think ensuring that we as the collective leadership team for the EM program ensure that we take the time and invest the energy and drive to ensure that alignment across the board will help with really important prioritization decisions that are going to happen in the next handful of years, as well as ensure that we have a collective definition of success so that we can take credit for the amazing work that the others were talking about. So out of that, I believe, grows this sense of shared fate and a real understanding that, you know, we win or lose together as a larger team. There is no single winner and a single loser. It's a team sport for us all across the so I would focus on alignment.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So awesome comments by the panelists. I think what I would add to that, and we heard a little bit of this from Candace and some of her remarks earlier, but I think, you know, maintaining a laser-like focus on safe performance, on the remaining missions and environmental liability, and building and maintaining the momentum to the highest extent possible, avoiding the distracting priorities and change. Inherent in that focus is a continued emphasis, or should be a continued emphasis, on a sense of urgency and a drive towards completion, which I think are best achieved through optimizing the effectiveness and utilization of the existing commercial contracts, which continue to emphasize partnering, shared risk, development of discrete scopes of work, identification of desired end states, a shared alignment of vision, and all of that underpinned by appropriate risk-informed incentive structures. I think that needs to be a continuing focus for the team.
Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I mean, our number one challenge at Fluor remains people. We touched on it on the panel, but you know, the Dennis Carrs and the Dave Olsons are not going to be around forever. So we see the folks want opportunities. That we got a lot of work across the complex, so there's lots of opportunities. But you know, you got to have the benefits programs. You got to have competitive compensation program. You got to have some opportunities for some hybrid work in the right disciplines. But we see folks, you know, as we try to attract talent and keep talent, people really want to feel a connection to the company and the mission, and they want a connection with the leadership. Are you communicating a vision? Is there a vision for the site where the folks see a long-term mission? A lot of these sites, they're working themselves, as somebody alluded, working themselves out of a job. So communicating that vision to the employees, making sure that you're constantly communicating with them and keeping them on board and connected, I think is a big part of what we try to do to keep people energized and retain them at these sites to make progress.
So, you know, we've heard a lot already today, and truly over the last, you know, couple of months about, you know, this being EM's 35th anniversary, right? 3.5 decades in the book, and it's great to celebrate anniversaries. It's great to mark milestones. But I was, you know, reflecting on, you know, what we've learned in those 35 years. I really go back to risk, right? Have we learned enough about the work that we do and how we do it to maybe pull out some of the places where we're being over conservative, right? Can we, is there an opportunity for us to do work in a faster, better, cheaper way, but also a safer way, right? By taking some of that accumulated experience. And so, Bob, I'll send this to you first, but you know, are there ways that, you know, as EM marks its 35th anniversary, that we should be thinking about risk differently, you know, as we approach the work?
Well, I think I would connect risk at these sites with the theme of this workshop. You know, all of our sites, we all lose sleep at night about safety or ConOps events, contamination events. All the sites have a pretty, a little bit of variability, but a robust risk management program. But I think, progress reduces risk. Partnering creates progress. So the theme that we've been seeing here, partnering, I think I've been in the EM a long time. It's the best partnering I've seen across the sites, I think maybe in my whole career, and between DOE and the contractors and the communities. So I guess this message of partnering, to me, I think that partnering is probably one of the keys to risk reduction, because that drives progress. And partnering drives retention. If you've got a partnering atmosphere at a site, people are going to stay there and be happy, and you're going to be able to keep talent. If you've got a good union relationship, I see a number of the USW folks here from Portsmouth and Paducah, several of the union presidents. Both those sites with Mariner Redfield and Greg Wilkett, they have a great relationship with the USW leadership there, so they partner. We don't always agree on everything, but at the end of the day, they're coming to a resolution on issues, and they're moving the work forward, and also partnering with these communities, because the communities, if you don't have a good relationship with the community, that can be an impediment to work. So to me, I think the partnering theme is key because I think it really is helping drive progress at these sites, and the progress is at the end of the day is what creates risk reduction.
Michael, to you, same question, right? On, is there opportunities for EM and the industrial base to take a different approach, be it safety, be it other, risk approaches, as we look at our work?
So I absolutely believe so. I would say, though, that what's really interesting when you think about it, we've all spent a lot of time thinking about tolerance stack up, right? And how everything's in tolerance, but the part doesn't work. So the way to think about this is risk stack up. So often, I see Jeff here, when something comes to Jeff's desk for recommendation for A or B, that paper's asking Jeff to make a decision about that much risk. But all of the other levels below Jeff across the site have also accepted that much risk individually. And what you're really asking Jeff to do is accept this much risk, but he doesn't realize that. So first thing you have to do is truly understand what risk we're talking about. It's a word we use all the time and very often really don't understand, quite frankly. And it's hard to measure. And then you have to create a transparency so that the leaders that are being asked to accept the risk truly understand the totality of the risk they're making a decision on. And then ultimately, again, going back to culture, you have to build a culture where an individual that is accepting action that reduces requirements and thereby accepting more risk isn't in every one of those instances feeling as if they're making a career decision at that moment. So the only way that you get individuals to accept more risk is to allow them to take that risk without it becoming personal risk every time. And I think if we're honest and we look across the complex and many of the folks who fight every day to accept risk or waive a requirement or enforce a requirement, there is in the back of their minds often a concern that if I accept this risk and something goes wrong, it's going to come 100% back to me. So we have to create an opportunity that you're allowed to be thrown out if you're stealing third.
Anybody here?
Yeah, so I'll try to attack this from a little bit of a different perspective. I think there are opportunities for the department and the contracting community working together to understand what can be done to maybe, both Bob and Michael have talked about risk a lot. And typically what happens when you deal with risk is you put something else in its place to guard yourself against it. And typically that's a piece of paper, or another process, or another procedure. And having seen this in the Office of Science when I was there, and we tried to step back and see how can we reduce some of the bureaucracy, some of the processes and procedures, which with all good intentions were put into place, but at the end of the day, they actually kind of befuddled the folks at the deck plate. And the one example I'll give you is going out to PNNL, I don't know, 10 years ago, and this was part of the department's safety awareness program. I can't remember the name of the program. But in talking with a 35-year electrician, he said, you know, here's the procedure I have, literally this thick, to go do a very simple task. And he posed a question to me, and I was the head safety guy in science at the time, was, do you think this makes me or the process safer with all this paper? And in reality, I had to do a little self-reflection, and the answer probably was no. And so to help us get past one of the most quintessential points of where we go back and forth on is the skill of the trade or skill of the craft, and how do we balance experience, you know, skill of the craft, time and service, et cetera, how do we, with complexity. So when I look at risk, I think it's risk, and I think Michael brought up a really good point, is how much is that person willing to accept, how much are we willing to accept in the management chain? And if we can educate ourselves and our people that, you know, accepting risk is okay as long as you understand it to a point, and make sure that they understand when they accept it, they're also accountable. Because too often people don't understand what accountability means when you go and you sign a piece of paper. We've all seen procedures which are hundreds of pages long, probably have 20 or 30 signatures on them. And I'm sure I'll offend some folks, but I'm not sure everyone read those entire procedures, all those 20 or 30 people. And we don't necessarily do ourselves a service by doing that. And for the worker at the deck plate, because this is where incidents occur, we have to make it as easy for those folks to make that decision and accept that accountability and accept that risk and understand the risk that they're accepting. So I would look at it a little bit, you know, just a little bit differently, not really differently, but a different perspective in how do we help our workforce make their decisions to accept risk and accept accountability that much simpler.
All right, well then I'll quickly follow up and say,
thanks, Marty.
how do we do that with the workforce, right? I mean, so because that is the fundamental question, right? How do you translate those decisions down, you know, down to that level?
So I think if we had solved this problem, we would never have any problems, right? Or if we had figured it out before. But I think it comes into, once again, it's communication, it's trust, it's involving the right people who are actually in different parts of the work process to have a vote in that process. And I will tell you, from where I came from in Canada, there were times when, you know, engineers and designers would put things together and procedure writers would put things together, and it would go out to the staff, and the staff would look at it and go, you got to be kidding me. There's a wall between me and what I have to work on. So first off, it's making sure you have the right people in the process. But I also think, to Michael's point, you need to have enough resilience and enough faith in yourself and the relationship you have with the regulator that you know, decisions will happen. Sometimes maybe the right decision is not made, but people have to be given the chance to understand, to accept that risk. And it's about having faith going down the chain, up the chain, and across the chain. And that chain, you know, goes across to DOE and other regulators as well. But we as the people who are responsible to conduct the work, that risk really is on us too.
So, you know, I think about, if you look on the front page of your agenda, right, it says partnering for progress, right? Theme of this year's conference. And you saw, you know, heard a few moments ago, Bob, you know, very rightly kind of mentioned, you know, the importance of that partnership. You heard Candace talk at great length in the opening this morning about partnering for progress. You heard Jeff mention it in the success panel just after that about the importance of the partnership. And, you know, Heatherly, I was thinking, you know, here we are at this point in the EM program. A lot of the, I don't want to call it easy, but a lot of the straightforward work is done, right? What's ahead of us is the hard stuff, right? What's ahead of us is the real challenge. And I think, that's going to require that partnership to be that much stronger, that much better. So as you think about where we go from here, what are the important things about, that partnership between at the site level, at the corporate level? How are we going to overcome those challenges in the partnership, going forward?
So I think partnership moving forward is really going to be the key to addressing some of these really big challenges that are coming up. I will tell you, though, I do think there's been some huge challenges already accomplished. And if you go back and you look at those contracts where that success has promulgated, it has been because of how the corporations support the LLCs, how the LLCs have a relationship with their DOE, and how DOE and the LLC in the community and its stakeholders interface. And that's a very hard thing to make work really well, but it's critical for that to happen. And so from a corporate perspective, one of the main things I try to do for myself is to be service-oriented to the LLCs. They need to know that if they have a need or an issue that they would like an outside perspective or some outside help with, that they can call and know that their corporate entities, and these LLCs are typically partnerships, any of the corporate parents will step in to help them. I also think from a corporate perspective, it's very important to try and help as a conduit between what we're hearing at headquarters and what we're hearing from the DOE at the sites and from our LLCs, and looking if there's disconnects and trying to help close those disconnects. And so that means having a very good relationship with the leadership at the sites on both the DOE side and then on the LLC sides, so that you can help close those gaps. But from the harder part of this, which is clearly DOE directly interfacing with the LLCs from a partnership standpoint, it is really working on those stakeholder relationships and each other to make sure that there is just a tremendous amount of communication to understand why each of us have the obstacles that we believe are in the way of actually progressing. The communities, they have real issues, and some of them, when we look at them from a logic standpoint, we think we want to discount them, but we can't. We just can't. We have to make that time and investment in the stakeholders so that they feel like they are a part of the process and a part of the whole partnering process as well. So there's really no easy answer for that, but I will tell you, I agree with Bobby. It feels like there is more partnership and true intent to try and do better with each other than I have felt probably in my entire career in the EM world. So everything that we're doing right now is working. We just have to continue to find ways to partner more so that we really are removing these disconnects where we are going down one path and then all of a sudden have a change because we didn't consider either a stakeholder or a headquarter or our own site DOE or corporate entities, the issues that they have, so that we really are removing those obstacles as early as possible versus later in the process when it gets much more expensive and timely to correct.
Dena?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I've seen, and I haven't been in EM for as long as some others, but I think I have seen, even the time that I've been here, just a great desire to partner. And I've actually spent a lot of my career actually in the commercial side. And one of the things that I was saying to someone recently is I've spent more time thinking about relationships and partnering on the government side than I ever did on the commercial side, in a very intentional way, almost as if it's part of the daily activities of how are you communicating better, how are you nurturing, how are you building that trust through, and that's not through everything always going rosy, it's actually through being very transparent, bringing up issues as well as potential solutions very quickly, asking for help. And I think I'm talking from the contractor side. This is so getting to partnership requires everybody doing some work. And I think from the contractor side, it's really leaning into that, truth-telling, that real focus on the mission, that real focus on the goals, that setting aside a lot of times, to the extent that we can, the contractual to get the work done, and then coming back to that. I think the other thing that you can't have partnership without trust. And so that, at the end of the day, if you don't trust that the person that you're working with, and I don't care what level you're working on, has the best intent and wants things to actually go well, if you don't believe that, then you're never going to have a partnership. And so I think approaching things as if everyone has good intent. So you just start with that, and that will get you 90% of the way there in any conversation. As Heather Lee said, I think communication is incredibly key. I do believe that at the headquarters, at the top leadership level, whether that's headquarters or local DOE counterparts and team members, there is a huge amount of partnership and teaming, a huge amount of recognition. We're only going to get further if we all come to this together, if we all come to the table and solve issues, if we all do our part in breaking down barriers to allow the team to do what they need to do to get done. I do think sometimes making sure that everyone within the entirety of both sides of the team membership, if you will, understands that everybody has good intent. Just because, I didn't go to school, I'm still a person at the end of the day. I happen to go work for a contractor and not DOE. Doesn't mean anything other than the fact that I still want to do good work. That oversight doesn't mean not help or gotchas. And it's really just breaking that down on a regular, because I don't see it at leadership, but sometimes you hear, and that can be undermining at the working level. And so identifying those relationship bumps quickly and addressing them is really important. And then I think at the end of the day, to get to true partnership, it's everybody being incentivized, whether or not that's through your performance discussions with your individuals on your team on how well did you enable the mission. And that may mean helping the contractor, helping DOE get there, whether or not that's incentivizing the work towards common goals amongst contractors to make sure that they are partnered towards the common thing. I think it's really just aligning to those things, being very open to discussion of what those alignments need to be, and then, fighting the daily battle to get there together.
Building on that concept of incentives and what the right incentives are to get the work done. Jim, another anniversary we mark this year is the 5th anniversary of the end state contracting model. I don't think you got me a card. Did I miss it? No? Nothing? Okay. All right. I'll look for that. So as we think about what the end state contracting model has meant in the complex, so how would you assess its effectiveness so far, and as we move into more larger end state contracts, how do we make it more effective?
Marty, you're going to get a card now. No, so I think if we reflect back on the last 5 years of the in-state contracting model, I think one of the ways to gauge its effectiveness and its implementation is in the report card that DOE put out recently, DOE by the numbers. Heather Lee mentioned a number of the accomplishments at West Valley and Portsmouth. The Hanford site, we've got 2 melters now operating at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, making glass. They retrieved a little over 3 million gallons of radioactive waste from 20 underground tanks. They've processed over 1 million gallons through TISCR in preparation for DF law. And they treated over 2 billion gallons of groundwater a year for the last 9 years, so we're closing in on about 19 billion gallons. At Oak Ridge, you've got the D&D and recovery of the former enrichment complex. So that's 13.6 million square feet of facilities demolished. And then they moved over and cleared D&D and cleared 18 acres with the legacy biology complex. And then again, at Savannah River, just some staggering numbers there in their high-level waste program, 18 million curies of high-level waste processed. Treatment of over 9 million gallons of high-level waste at SWPF. And then probably they've got at least, 11 tanks, Heatherly, maybe it's 12 now, actively in the closure process. So, just examples, if you just look at the accomplishments, I think that gives you some feel for the effectiveness. I think I would add to that and say, the in-state contracting model is proven to be appropriate for cleanup and closure at sites that with near-term completion dates, as well as sites that have cleanup milestones in the future. The model emphasizes meaningful, visible, and measurable progress through defined in-states that both accelerate cleanup and ensure reductions in both environmental risk and financial liability. Keeping a focus on right-sizing task orders to reduce the risk of funding instability, I think, has been one of the benefits of the program, and it goes towards, as I mentioned to the early career professionals yesterday, keeping the main thing. I do think there's still opportunities as we continue to implement the in-state contracting model. It is. The implementation has been ongoing now for about 5 years. It's been a staggered implementation as sites have transitioned to that contract model. And I think the industry, DOE and the commercial partners have done a great job in taking lessons learned from all of those previous implementations and factoring them into new in-state contracting models as they become the code of record. Obviously, there is a demand signal on staffs. This implementation does require a burn-in time period. It is a steep learning curve for both sides of the staff as they, especially for the first time, if it's the first time they're implementing the in-state contracting model. But there's also a demand signal then on the staff to implement as the task orders as we go forward in time. And I think there's still quite a bit of efficiency to gain in terms of the review, approval, concurrence cycles, and the timelines associated with them. There's still some efficiencies to gain in the task order administration, but I think those again, as the sites and as the contractors and as the Department of Energy, gain experience and continue to gain experience, we're very quickly learning how to adapt the framework to fit the mission needs of the individual sites. And I think that's where the shared partnership, the shared vision, and the shared risk discussions that go on between the partners and the client is where we get the biggest bang for the buck, and where I would encourage us to keep the focus.
Heather?
So the in-states contracting process, one of the huge benefits is during and after transition. under some of the other contracting methods, usually there would be a tremendous amount of material differences, depending on how long it took for that contract to be let. And there's just this whole process that you have to go through to try and get alignment. And sometimes that process could be a little bit contentious, and certainly a distraction to all sides. Whereas with the end states, you're working on those task orders right up front, and I think actually these task orders has enhanced this partnership that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, because it was a fairly new process in the DOE world. I mean, it's been, task orders have been used in DOD and NASA and places like that, but for how we were applying it, it was a new process, and so it required both sides to really work with each other to figure out how we were going to make this task order process work. And so I think that increased the partnership. And it has certainly made that first 6 months or year afterwards much easier to get in alignment from a contractual baseline standpoint with each of those task orders. So I think that process, it let us get on with it in a very positive, meaningful way. From a improvement on effectiveness, I think the end state process is probably today, how it's being used is a little different than what it was being first envisioned. I think we thought there were going to be a lot more task orders and an easier way to say that we were done with a task order, and we've determined that that can be pretty administrative. And so I think we have moved in a lot of cases to multi-year task orders, but it's really important in those task orders to have meaningful accomplishments, which I think we do, but we need to be able to say when we are done with those milestones that we are in fact done, or, periodically being able to say, you've drawn a line within this task order and you're done. And the reason that's important, I think it's important for DOE, I think it's very important for the workforce. You need to celebrate successes. And you don't need to have it later where it's like, oh, but now that you've missed this milestone, now it negates, the previous milestone. We can't be doing that. We need to have milestones. We need to celebrate those milestones when we complete them, and that propagates momentum. And then thirdly, from a company perspective, you have to be able to say that you've earned something, and from a cash flow standpoint, you can be successful in continuing to actually run the business. So, and I think we're doing a good job there. I just think that's probably one of those areas we could be a little more effective.
Any others? Okay. So I feel like you can't go to a conference or have any kind of discussion, today with executive leadership in any industry and not quickly get to artificial intelligence and digital tools. We've seen, I think, an increasing build, an increasing focus in our industry. We had a really good discussion at the last House Cleanup Caucus in July around the opportunities for AI and digital transformation to impact the EM mission. And, I know we're going to have a deeper dive into this at a full panel tomorrow, but as we think about, the companies and the projects that your companies manage, and as you look across your projects and the challenges that you face, Michael, I'll start with you, but, do you see these tools, one, being, start to being, implemented in meaningful ways? And do you really see the opportunity for AI or a digital transformation to impact the EM mission, in the near term?
So, you're right. If you can only say AI, machine learning, wave your hand, you can get at almost any panel, but Marty said I couldn't do that. So, just to kind of baseline everybody, so in our Virginia shipyard in Newport News, Virginia, we have 31 nuclear ships under construction today, and we'll put another 16 nuclear-powered submarines under contract in the next 12 months. When you think about what that creates from a demand for workforce, we've all talked about workforce, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as the day goes on, but it is the most competitive aspect of any business. Attraction and retention, high caliber quality people people that you want to stay. The danger is that in a workforce competitive environment, you get the people that are going to stay, not the people that you want to stay. That's a big piece. So what we have done to drive throughput in the nuclear factory and to help with attraction and retention, in other words, to build a workforce of the future simultaneously, is we've employed over about $1 billion in corporate capital over the last handful of years going to fully digital work packages. So, you know, Joe, back in the day, you'd have the 85-pound drawing you'd have to carry from the shed to the ship, and you're always a little worried, one, they're gonna hurt themselves carrying the 85-pound drawing around, and then Greg's gonna be mad at us, or they're just not gonna go get the drawing, and they're just gonna weld it anyway. Both of those are really bad. So what we've done is we've put digital drawings where you see the room in 3 dimensions, and then you build the room. And it's been an amazing workforce revitalization tool. It has reduced errors in the manufacturing process, and it's driving attraction and retention because it's a pretty good tool, and it can be a whole lot better. So over time, as we continue to iterate it and mature that process, the workforce then becomes more and more engaged and embedded and owns that process. So that's really, really important. The other thing that we're doing is in the execution of the refueling complex overhaul of the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier fleet, about 4 or 5 year availability, defuel, refill both reactors, strip the entire ship down, about 27,000 different work packages in there. Really complex scheduling process, as you might expect, lots of interdependence. So what we've started to do is go back over the handful that we've executed so far, gather data, begin to execute data analytics to feed an AI scheduling tool that will help us optimize the original plan, and maybe more importantly, as you execute a 4 or 5 year process, or if you're doing remediation or cleanup of unintended or unknown events that happen, it can let you quickly iterate the schedule to figure out what the optimum pathway from today forward is based on that information. So we're just beginning on that path right now, but that implementation of that tool is showing real promise, and we're very hopeful that once we get it up and running, we can then move it across to the rest of it. When you think about that from an EM perspective, I started out by saying we invested a little bit more than $1 billion in corporate capital to create the digital tool. So who's going to invest $1 billion? How's that going to be created for EM in such a way that it's an EM asset that can then benefit the entirety of the complex? Who's going to accept the risk of validation of the scheduling? Who's going to validate that we've got the right work packages together, that we've got all the appropriate requirements in? That brings you to, I think, maybe the most important piece of all of that, is that you have to have requirement consistency. Right? So if you think about what a contract change does, it creates churn in the system. And we talk a lot about how churn costs money, right? Churn costs time, time is money, churn costs not just the additional cost of executing that change, it's the disruption of perturbation to the workforce, to the contract schedule, to everything else that comes from that change. We have a process with our Navy customer, we just accept that as reality. And you price delay and disruption into every change on an agreed upon rate, and you don't have to argue about it. It works because you have alignment on your vision and values, you have alignment on the mission, and working to get it all executed. So both of these types of tools and the implementation of those tools requires an intense amount of work to get alignment on the scope of work, and then a very detailed, rigorously developed scope of work. Not a high-level scope, very detailed scope of work. We have a tendency, I think, to not always have the best alignment on what the actual scope is. We spent a lot of time talking about what we thought the scope would be, EM, and we probably are neither correct. So that rigorous dedication to validation of the scope of work up front is key. So, and then the last thing I'll leave you with, think about speeding up the ability to replan and reschedule the execution path from here to there. You have to be able to execute any changes to the contract in a viciously fast fashion. And I would say as a large team, we have lots of opportunity to improve on our timely execution of contract changes. So you can't replan a schedule a year later be executing the change and generating the schedule. You simply cannot do that. You can't play catch up so you've got to have a process, commitment to execute in a timely fashion. Team.
Heatherly?
So AI, it is so exciting to me and terrifying at the same time. Some of the really cool things that I think we're starting to embark on with AI, we're using it to really create the basis for many documentations and papers that take a lot of information that's been produced across the sites, and it's been able to be synthesized into papers without someone having to spend a lot of time putting that information together. Now, it still needs to be reviewed and ultimately added to by the authors, but the time to produce that thoughtful information that is needed for these technical, challenging issues that we're trying to share information on, I mean, that's a huge benefit. You're going to hear from Tom Burns tomorrow, some of the things that they're doing at SRMC for liquid waste, where they're using it for developing training. So they have a lot of CBT training where they're looking at having AI actually create the majority of that training. And based on their recent research, you're going to see about 70% of it can be created with AI, and then your trainer or folks that are working on the training are then finishing the product with only 30% of their time versus the 100%. So those are a couple of examples. I envision AI, and I do agree with Michael that there is an investment that needs to be made that could be quite expensive, but what we could have out of AI is the ability, once we start linking databases and things of that nature, where you're going to go and plan a work package, and AI, if you give it the right filters, would literally be able to give you a ton of suggestions on things to consider for that work package in a much more expeditious way than the way we have to do it today. Today, you know, the work planner has to go to a variety of resources to try and collect that information, and it could be done almost instantaneously with AI. It can help the process engineers, right? There's all this data that is being collected, and with AI, it may find trends much quicker and expeditiously, where then the process engineer is then spending the time to go figure out what to tweak versus actually finding the trend to begin with. And here's a couple of tools that I probably would love to have. One of them would be, you know, as I'm writing my text or I'm writing my emails, it would be nice if there was an AI tool, and there is one, that says, you might want to rethink that email that you're ready to send. The tone might be not taken correctly. So from a human standpoint, I think that would be nice to have that little tool maybe as a little reminder, depending on the word verbiage and usage that you're doing. Another useful tool that I would envision is you're doing your time card, and you get a little reminder going, there's no indication that you were here for that full 10 hours on Tuesday. Are you sure it's 10 hours? Something of that nature. And we do need to get there, because we really need to eliminate just the whole issue with time card issues and the distraction that's been causing the industry of late. And that's just a few items. The terrifying part for me is how AI can be used to distort. You know, I don't know how many of you guys have had an avatar yet. I have not, but I've seen some avatars, and I'm going to tell you what, they look like the person. And so I could see that being used to be both positive and negative, depending what that avatar is doing. But anyways, I think it is an exciting time for AI, and I think 5 years from now, I just can't even imagine the tools that we're going to have available to us to make our jobs that much easier.
Well, and a quick public service announcement. You know, under Michael's leadership as chairman of FCOG, and now under DJ Johnson's leadership as FCOG chair, you know, FCOG has been sponsoring monthly webinars, virtual sessions, virtual discussions, kind of highlighting some of the exciting things that all of the sites around the complex, not just EM sites, but science labs, production sites, weapons labs, are doing in the area of digital tools and digital transformation. We had a really great discussion with the Kansas City plant last month, and then just last Friday, a really good presentation from Idaho National Laboratory. So I would just encourage you, if you're interested in that topic, want to see kind of the cutting edge of what's happening, to keep an eye out, go to the FCOG website and check out the schedule for those upcoming webinars. I kind of wanted to, end where we started as we kind of approach the end of our time. We started talking about, what all of these folks saw was the biggest challenge or what needed to be the biggest focus, right? And, almost to a person, every single one of them touched on work, right? And I really wanted to kind of dig into that a bit more, both in terms of, at the leadership level on our sites, and then, at all levels with recruiting and particularly retaining and developing the workforce. So, Dena, I'll start with you. As you think about, at this stage in EM, we'll start with at the leadership level first, right? So, how can EM ensure that, the best talent, an increasingly competitive landscape for that talent, gets deployed on EM projects?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is really in the mission, and in the meaningful work that you provide to the contractors. So, and the partnership. I mean, I think any contractor wants to work with a customer that partners with them on an incredible mission, that appreciates the work that's done, that works really hard to get something really, really important done. So I think the other part is on, when we talk about, I have a little bit of a lag in bidding here, right? We had a lot of contracts turnover. And so one of the things that I'm sure everyone is doing, but is being really diligent in how are we bringing up that workforce and leadership and making sure that we have the folks that can take over the folks that are in those current positions. That's at the top level and then several levels down. I think one of the things that EM can do is be really open to, especially since we're not usually when you bid, you've got to have that known resume, it's got to have the right experience, all those things on it, to allowing the contractors to move folks into those leadership, those key positions on existing contracts, who may not have all the boxes checked, but we know have the right skill set and the right motivation and the right brain power and hard work to get it done, and accept those folks and lean a little bit forward into what may be just a slight risk, because we're never gonna, we have reputation to, and it's really important, I know, at least I'm sure to all of us, certainly to Bechtel, to make sure that at the end of the day, we're getting the job done for our customer and for the nation. And so we're never gonna put anyone into a position in which they're going to fail, but we do wanna stretch them, and that's gonna answer a lot of this workforce issue, is allowing those folks to stretch in these times where we're a little bit more steady state. Is a great time to grow people, but you have to be diligent in movement to make that happen, because what you can do is get quite stale and say, no, I really like Mary. Mary's been doing a great job for 10 years. Well, one, Mary's not really growing and advancing her career, and wouldn't it be great if Mary could do something else? And two, when Mary, if you don't let me move people around, and if I'm not growing people underneath Mary and moving her out to allow for that growth, then I'm gonna end up with a huge gap, which is some of what we're facing at this point in time. So I would say, I don't think you have to do a lot to make sure we pay attention to the work and that we put the right people and the right level of workforce on it. I mean, I think we're all very reputable, very honorable companies that really we just want to do a good job, and we want to help you get to the end goal. But some of this workforce is going to take a partnership and leaning into accepting folks that may not have that resume, because we're trying to grow them into that for the next.
Yeah, and Heather Lee, I'll go to you next. And I think about, I think EM and just our industry in general has gotten a lot better at at recruiting, at bringing folks in, but where we're seeing, I think, the challenge is in maybe 1 or 2 to 5 years, making sure that after they get a taste of our industry, we're able to retain them or show them a career path or show them meaningful development that, if you get them past 5 years, right, you really see them stay for the long term. So thinking about that 1 to 5 year, retention and development period, what are some things that we need to be thinking about to address that?
Yeah, so this has been a big concern, I think, for all of us. I know as boards and when we interface with the LLCs, we really look at the turnover rate. And the turnover rate has gone down pretty significantly in the last couple of years, which is good because it was quite high. But when you dig into the numbers and you look at who's still leaving, about 50% at a lot of the sites is your 1 to 5 year employees. And so when you think about the effort that it takes to qualify people in our industry at the beginning, and that 50% of them might be leaving, and now you're having to hire that many more people to come and fill that gap, I mean, that's a huge amount of effort going into those folks that are leaving. So 2 things. One would be if they're leaving because they have to relocate and they could be near another mission of ours, I think we should do everything in our power to try and keep them within the industry. So if they do want to move around and things of that nature, it's very easy to accept them at a site and give credit for where they've been and to recognize that service and the training. They shouldn't have to start over per se on their training, et cetera, so that you're really kind of keeping that connectivity. But within the first 5 years at a specific site, we really, and I do think the sites are doing a much better job with this, have a game plan. So, today's, particularly the younger folks are the Gen Zs and the millennials as well, but they want to know their career path. And so you can't promise them that career path, but you can give them a roadmap to that career path. And that takes quite a bit of time and effort to kind of put that together, to give people milestones early in their career where they feel like they're making progress. And quite frankly, they demand it. And if we don't do that, if we don't take that time and then do exactly what Dena was mentioning, where you are giving them those opportunities to move around and kind of breaking the barriers for that movement, then they're going to leave us. And it's too expensive to have them leave us in the numbers that they're leaving us. And I think those are the 2 main. I think there's other things too. I would even throw out to DOE, particularly where there are sites where there's multiple DOE missions and we tend to poach a little bit from each other. You might want to come up with some metrics and some incentives to the contractor on, how are they keeping those 1 to 5 year folks, at the site so that we're not losing that investment.
Bob? Yeah, I'll just add to that. If you think about when you worked at a site, what do you remember from that site? Maybe what kept you? Well, for me, it's 2 things. First is the people. First thing I typically remember is who's the folks I work with at Savannah River, or Portsmouth, or wherever. And the second one, what Dena alluded to, is the mission. So you remember what the mission was and what you accomplished, right? Those are the 2 things I think most of us probably remember. So if you tie that back to how do you keep leaders at a site, go back to the theme we started off with, at partnering. If you've got a site that's partnering, they're productive, they're working safe, you got a good atmosphere to work at, I think that's a pretty good recipe. If the people are working well together, if they're accomplishing work safely, getting the mission, that's a pretty good recipe to get senior leadership to stay at us. I think, to me, those are a couple of things make a difference. Yep.
So maybe to sum up what Heatherly and Dena and Bob all talked about, I go back to way many lives ago when I joined the submarine force. And one of the things that recruited me in there, but also got me to stay, was a known career path. You may not actually make all those steps because you may make choices going as you go forward, but they were milestones and accomplishments that continued to further your career as you went up the chain. Now, we're not the military, we don't change out people every 3 years by direction, but there are aspects, I think, that all the panelists have talked about here where people can move from site to site to different job roles, and they continue to go up the chain from a responsibility level, et cetera. The other part of that I think is important is investing in people when they get onto the site. Now, we try to do this, but sometimes we just don't do it as well as we should. When people come in and they feel appreciated, that people are investing in them and their career, you know, giving them the training, the ability to do different things, different opportunities, that really breeds some trust. It breeds some ability to want to go forward, want to either continue with the organization or continue with the industry. And face it, we're probably not going to keep everybody at a site the entire time. It's not healthy. I would say people who stay at one site the entire career, maybe not the best for them career-wise. But if you can move them around, and as you do that, they move up the chain, that's how you grow your leaders. And you just can't take people and plop them someplace. And so I think when you look at the ability to have a known career path, not necessarily that's what you'll do, with invested attention and training for them within the first couple of years, where they can take that and go do something in your company or elsewhere, that breeds the ability to be successful. If you look at, and I would tell you the Naval Reactors program does it pretty well, even though their retention early on is not huge, but if you look at it, they build a series of career ladders and leaders who are pretty darn good. And you know, this industry has a lot of its roots in the Naval Reactors program. I'm sure there are NR people out here who are saying, yeah, Joe, go save some more. But it's something I think that we can learn from. And I think that's the heart of where as we go into different things in the future, of whether we're building new facilities, starting up new facilities, tearing down facilities, to be able to give people that career path and give them something to shoot for. Because people generally want reassurance. They want some reassurance. I think if you can do that, you take a big step to improving your retention.
That's a great way to wrap us up. Thanks, Joe. And I apologize that we're out of time. I feel like we could have this group weigh in all afternoon, but I hope you enjoyed the time we did have with them. Please join me in thanking our panel. We're now on a quick break to recaffeinate and refuel, and we'll see you back here at 3 o'clock. Thanks so much.